and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Valiant.
And I'm Matt Valiant.
And we're Valiant and Valiant Toon Detectives. This week on the show, it's time for another one of our Council of Doof episodes. Matt, what is that?
Once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Doof Council, at the Council of Doof level, will get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the Doof canon. Scott and I, and maybe some guests, will meet, talk about the movie that was selected, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we leave the final decision up to you, our listeners. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find a link in the show notes of this very episode that will take you over to our Patreon account. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. And there will be a public poll for you to vote yes or no on this month's movie. Matt, speaking of this month's movie, what is it?
This week, the Council has put forth the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh boy, I cannot wait to talk about this one. So we're going to talk all about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It will be a full spoilers discussion. And then at the end of the show, Matt, fittingly, I want to talk to you about another detective movie I saw recently, because I think it's similar in some ways and quite good. So we're going to be talking about The Kid Detective at the very end of the show.
Sounds fun.
But let's just jump right into the first movie we're talking about and discuss Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
This is the tale of an up-and-coming movie star named Roger Rabbit and a down-and-out private detective named Eddie Valiant. Ooga booga! Every moment they were together was a new adventure in trouble.
Hide me, Eddie! Please!
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A tune-hating detective is a cartoon rabbit's only hope to prove his innocence when he is accused of murder.
This movie was written by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman, based on the novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary Wolfe, and of course directed by the incomparable 80s director Robert Zemeckis, who had just the most amazing run of the mid to late 80s ever.
Yes. Absolutely.
So I think the way to start with this movie, Matt, is to just declare up front that I think this is basically a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And I don't like there are very few perfect movies out there, and I think this is one of them. And I think Robert Zemeckis has the esteemed pleasure of having directed two perfect movies back to back with Back to the Future and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on all of those notes. Those are two movies that I could watch at any time, any number of times. I've never gotten sick of them. I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit may be one of my favorite movies, with no caveat, not like favorite comedy or favorite animated film. I've just always loved this movie. One of the things that was kind of a pleasant surprise for me as I was doing the research for this episode is I've always thought of Who Framed Roger Rabbit as like a movie that not many people know about. And like, I'll mention it in mixed company, and people will generally be like, yeah, I've seen that. But like, it turns out that this movie is on a lot of critics' like top 10 movies of all time lists.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, correct. Because I feel that it deserves that. Actually, it just, we're going to talk about this in detail, but like, it just does everything right.
It does. Yeah. Lightning in a bottle is so cliche to say, but it's a movie that I don't understand how it was made the way it was. And like, it's a type of movie that there will never be another movie like this. They're just literally, this was just the stars aligned. Everything came together perfectly to make this particular movie happen. And you couldn't do it again. And they've tried to do the cartoon live action mix thing since this, right? There have been several movies that have tried to do a version of this. None of them have come close to equaling what this movie does. And I think as we get into it, really the thing that I want to spend the most time talking about today is just the fundamental storytelling that is on display in this movie is just really fucking good. I was talking to you before we started recording that I think they should teach this movie in screenwriting classes. I really do. Because I think if you look at everything this movie is doing, it's just basic. This is not a complex plot. It's just basic storytelling, basic character defining, basic mise en scène, basic setup payoff. It's just all like the most basic concepts of structure in screenwriting done perfectly.
Exactly. The execution, of course, is not just flawless, but triumphant and soaring in many plays. Like it's doing all of these things, but it's doing them all like at the same time. Like there are so many conversations where, take like try to think of the most boring conversation in the movie, and you'll realize that conversation is establishing character, establishing relationships between characters, and setting up future things that are going to happen between those characters, providing you with world building or background information that you need to understand the plot as it's unfolding, and also probably being hilarious at the same time.
Yes,
where there's just constant like cleverness that like it's not even necessary, like stuff like when Valiant shows up at Maroon's office and he's like, do you have the will? And he replies, I have the will. The question is, do you have the way? It's like that's just unnecessary flexing at this point,
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of fun moments like that. I think when Maroon asks him, "Do you know anything about show business?" and I know it's like no business I know. He's just like, there's what I love about that is I think Eddie Valiant is one of, I'm being hyperbolic here, but whatever, I don't care, is one of the most competently written characters on screen ever. Like, again, he's not that complex of a character, but it's all executed perfectly. Like moments like that where he does that kind of joking, you understand that there's a clowny humor lover underneath this exterior that he's emitting, and eventually you find out why. But like, so much of what Bob Hoskins is doing with this character is, and so much of the writing with the character is betraying parts of him that you don't get to see yet.
Yes.
It's so expertly done. Like those jokes are so perfect when you realize, oh, they were the class clowns in their police school and their father was literally a clown, and like they were like a family of clowns together, like, and humor was such a huge part of their lives. And so you understand. It's so good, man. It's so good.
Yeah, and the gradual thawing of his heart and loosening of basically of his grief as Roger comes into his life, and he goes from trying to reject Roger because he's trying to reject all of these things that remind him of his brother, and then gradually getting swept up into it and becoming more funny, and then until the end when obviously like once again, it's not just an action scene when he kicks the asses of all the weasels. It's a character moment of culmination of him just finally uncorking and releasing like the clown energy that has been pent up in him the whole movie that you kind of knew was there.
Yeah, it's wonderful, especially the part where he is rhyming and is about to say balls, but he can't say balls. I forget what he says. I think he says face, and then one of the weasels says, that doesn't rhyme with wall. And then he says, but this does. And then he kicks him in the balls.
Yeah. No, it's great. Nose. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's nose. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen this movie so many times.
I want to spend so much time on Eddie because first of all, the reason this movie works is because it's a movie in which cartoons and real people live amongst each other, and we'll talk about the special effects eventually. We have to. It's amazing. But the movie plays that straight, and the movie plays this as if it's just normal. This is just a film noir detective mystery, and so much so that like the big plot is they're putting in a freeway, and I feel like that's like just a film noir like trope of the villain's master plan is just a really big highway. I feel like I've seen that in like, I think the video game LA Noire had that exact same plot, and I think LA Confidential had that same plot. Like I think it's just an LA Noire detective story plot to have it all be about a highway. It's just a thing. It's the thing that these stories do.
Right.
And I loved that, but they play it all straight, and even the goofy parts are played straight. Like the moment you find out that Eddie's brother was murdered is when his love interest Dolores says his brother was murdered by a tune. dropped a piano on his head. It's objectively hilarious, but she plays it so straight, and the whole tone of the scene is everyone's like, oh.
Yeah. So I mean, one thing, tone is the hardest thing in the world to manage. Just the hardest thing. Like movies that I otherwise really love. Like there's so many movies that really are on the top of my list of like favorite movies where they still have scenes where I'm like, I don't actually know what you're supposed to be feeling here. I like they just didn't quite nail the tone. But this movie constantly has the tone dialed in perfectly. And like the proof of that is that you can go from, you know, comedy, like pratfall comedy, to like a different flavor of comedy where it's like the cartoon woman and the man are playing patty cake in the hotel room, but they're literally playing patty cake.
Yes.
And then like this movie makes me cry reliably. Like there's two scenes in this movie where every single time I've seen it, I will like get choked up. Actually, I shouldn't say every single time, because when I was a kid, I didn't know what the hell was happening, honestly. But like the two scenes are when he's going through the pictures and he's seeing the pictures of him with Dolores, and he's like smiling, and you're like, oh, he's fine. Like, oh, it's like happy Eddie. We're finally seeing Eddie happy, and he's remembering the good times with Dolores. And then he gets to the pictures of his brother, and like you see how crushed he is for the first time.
Yeah.
And like that always gets me choked up. And then the other scene that always gets me choked up is toward the end when he's about to, you know, drink from the bottle of whiskey to steal his courage, and then like realizes like, this isn't me. I don't need this anymore. And it's totally wordless, right? It's a totally wordless scene. Perfect. My kids don't even understand why I'm like visibly choking up during that scene, because they're like, why is he pouring the drink out? I'm like, he's an alcoholic. It's a powerful moment. but like it works so well. It's so beautiful, and it works so well. And that is like in the middle of a bunch of silliness, right? And that's why, like, that's what's so amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean that scene is preceded by him throwing the bottle up into the air, shooting the tuned gun he got from Yosemite Sam, and one of the bullets being a very stereotypical Native American bullet that chops the bottle in half with an axe.
Right.
And so it's this moment of real catharsis combined with this moment of abject goofiness.
Yes.
And because the movie takes both of those parts seriously, it's like, I think one of the things this movie does very well is it lets those cathartic moments stay. It doesn't strip it away mid-moment with a goofy moment. It like even when Valiant is telling his story to Roger, he's telling the story of what happened to his brother. The movie allows him to go through the entire story before we even see Roger again, and he's being a tune crying to this very sad story.
Right.
Like it just allows that moment to sink in. It allows that moment to exist in space for a little bit of time before we go back to the silliness. And so it's like, okay, I get this. I get, like, we can have our fun, but there's also some serious shit going on here too.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that scene in particular, basically the camera is, I believe, if I remember correctly, like slow zooming in on him.
Yes.
So that Roger gradually disappears from the frame, and then you're just in Eddie's world with him. And then you're right, we go back to Roger, but we were fully with him in that moment. And I think there's something important about this movie, and this probably also applies to Back to the Future, but just like the constant pace and the constant barrage of visual storytelling beats that are happening. Like I think part of me wants to get like a stopwatch and just like, I don't know how you would actually do this, but just like time the number of seconds between a distinct piece of information being conveyed to you.
Yeah, I mean,
it's got to be like 5 seconds or something on average.
Especially in the first act. Especially in the first act. It's like, it's such a stuffed first act. Like the first time we meet Valiant, what is the first thing he says? The first thing he says is he's sitting there in the on the set, and he says, "Tunes," and then he takes a swig of his booze, and then he puts it in his gun holster. Right. And that one moment has told you so much about this person already. Like that was 3 seconds of film, and it's told you he's a cop or cop adjacent, he's an alcoholic, and he hates tunes.
Right.
Boom, bam, bam, bam. Like, it's so efficient and so wonderful. And then the movie can take that and complicate it, because it kind of drip feeds us the why he hates tunes. And then we understand, oh, well, actually, like, we see when he encounters Betty Boop that he, like, actually really likes her. And, like, there's some memory attached to that. And so, like, oh, maybe, so he didn't always hate tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then we learn, oh, no, he was actually a tune detective. Like, so tunes were his life up until this tragic moment. And the way the movie slow feeds you this information about him is perfect, because frankly, this character starts the movie pretty unlikable. He's a selfish asshole to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Another moment that's just chock full of information is when he gets to his office, or he gets to his building, and he has to straighten the sign on the outside of the building because it's
the sign that says Valiant and Valiant, which again is telling you information.
Telling you information. And then the mailman hands him a pile of bills, which he says are bills. Mm-hmm. And then as Valiant is standing there looking at the bar across the street, he throws the bills into the trash can.
Yes.
And then goes to the bar. And they're like, okay, no dialogue was needed. You told me everything about where this person is in his life and what his priorities are, and how his business was doing, and all of these things.
And Hoskins does this really clever thing with his lips and his hand, where whenever he's looking at alcohol, like he's you can see he's salivating, and he'll rub his face and like just be like rubbing his mouth over his face, and it's like I don't know, it's very distinct and very powerful that you see him do it constantly in the early parts of the movie, where it's like, it's not just that he wants to go get a drink. It's like he needs it. It's such a perfect way of displaying that alcoholism. But I think the greatest moment of this in this movie is the patented Zemeckis mise-en-scène like path through photographs, right? Because there's this moment when he gets up into his office and he's looking at the pictures like you talked about. And like when he sees the picture of his brother, we do this cut where he looks longingly across the desk, and we see the other half of the desk is filled with, it's got his brother's name on there, and it's got all his detective work, and it's covered in dust, right? Absolutely covered in dust.
Right.
And then Zemeckis does this slow pan across the desk, where our character that we're teaching people about is now out of the frame, and he's not back in the frame till this thing is done. But it's a slow pan where we see basically the entire story of Bob Hoskins. We see the entire story of Eddie Valiant. This is where we learn they were a tune detective, and the pair of them were very successful tune detectives. It's where we learn that that they were used to be on the police force and were the two class clowns at the police force. It's where we learn that him and his brother were with his father on a traveling clown show. And it's where you learned that when they opened the detective agency, it was the two of them and Dolores, that they were connected in this. And this is a Zemeckis thing, because he does the same exact fucking thing in Back to the Future. Back to the Future opens with us doing this slow pan through Doc Brown's apartment or house, whatever, and we see on his wall is plastered the story of his life. And it's just really efficient, and you understand everything. And I think it comes at a very important part in this movie, because I think it comes at the part in this movie where you've really just grown to hate him as a character. And so this is the moment where you see this backstory where you're like, oh, and you really start to identify with him for the first time. And I think that's really important, because the movie wouldn't work if you don't switch from being like, oh, this guy sucks, to, oh man, I feel really bad for him.
You're right, because that's right after he's like basically ruined Roger Rabbit's life, and taken the sleazy pictures and just sort of been kind of a despicable person, and then we finally get that moment where the stuff that's been subconsciously built up in our minds is actually explained for the first time. I think I actually want to try to tie together the idea of the constant visual storytelling and the tone management, because there's something that happens. I don't necessarily want to say like when you're watching a Zemeckis movie, but maybe that is the truth. But it's like at a certain point, he just kind of wears away your defenses, and you just have to hand him over the reins of your mind, and you're like, take me where we're gonna go, Zemeckis, because you like I understand that if I'm anything other than paying full attention, then I'm going to miss things. You're
Mhm.
giving me so much information, and it's all like not only necessary but like fun and funny. And so you just like absorb it, and then he's able to really suck you in and manipulate you a lot more kind of freely and deftly, and move you from moment to moment in a balletic fashion without feeling tied down to the previous moment, because you're just like, I trust you, subconsciously, implicitly, you obviously know what you're doing. Move me through the story.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think this is a movie that that really has to happen because it's such a wild concept
Mm-hmm.
of like tunes and people living together, that you need. And I think the movie does. I think once again, the first act of this movie is doing so many things. It's doing so many things about Valiant, but establishing the way that this world works, the way that tunes are kind of second class citizens and how they're paid and how they're kind of segregated from the population. The way they just interact, and like it's so smart and so clever. I love all the setups in the Acme factory as well. Like we see basically every prop device that's going to be used in the final fight against Doom and the Weasels on display there, like the hammer, the hole in the wall, all that stuff is established right away, like as just little joke moments. And like you said, the movie's so busy, it's doing so many things that not only is that stuff establishing setups, but it's also establishing how all the other police officers think Valiant is a joke, because they just tease him and mess with him and try to hit him in the face with that mallet thing.
Right.
It's doing all this stuff. So I think you're right that like Zemeckis, I think they looked at this ridiculous idea and they recognized that in order to get it to work, we've got to invest people in it. We've got to get them. I think batten down their defenses or throw away their defenses is a perfect way of saying that, because it's just a wild concept, and you've got to inundate people in it before you can really start to mess with their emotions within it.
They have to buy in. And I don't know, I've seen the movie so many times that I don't remember what it was like to see it the first time, but I definitely feel like that was a thing they wanted to make sure of, is like, we got to get the buy-in like immediately. Like you can't be rolling into minute 15 still thinking like, I don't know about this concept of tunes living in Hollywood. You have to sort of be in the movie by that point, or it's not going to work very well on you. I think that's true. Just still sort of on the concept of visual storytelling before we leave that, I think I mentioned this many months ago when we sort of offhandedly talked about this movie briefly, but I'll mention it again because it's like my favorite thing, and I definitely didn't notice it when I was a kid, and I'm not sure if this is a thing that everyone notices, and I was just late to the party or what exactly, but there's this great storytelling thing that keeps happening where people, mostly tunes, but also Dolores, keep stopping Eddie from drinking. And it's usually not like them intentionally interceding and being like, you have a drinking problem, Eddie. It's like it's little things like he pours the drink for himself in Maroon's office, and then Dumbo flies up to the window and startles him, and you just offhand you just may notice that he has dropped the glass that he was pouring for himself. But that this sort of thing happens repeatedly, actually, where like he's about to take a drink, and he's about to take the drink later again in Maroon's office, and Roger does the screaming chimney thing, and the glass shatters.
Yep.
But it happens like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 times in the movie, and it's great because it's like it's like the tunes and the role they play in his life are trying to help him and trying to stop him from drinking, but never directly or overtly. And I don't know why I love it so much. I just do.
No, I think that's perfect. That had never occurred to me in that way, but you're right. That is a beat that occurs enough to where you start thinking it is something intentional. And I mean, tunes are the connection to his previous life, and he has turned to the drink to run away from that life. And so it is almost as if they're trying to pull him back from that. They're trying to pull him back to the person he was before, and probably on some level wants to be again.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all great.
And of course, like, I think the Christopher Lloyd Judge Doom character, who we haven't talked about very much yet, is like the perfect antagonist for a person who has fled from tooniness, to fled from comedy, and is being destroyed from it, because Christopher Lloyd Judge Doom is also a character who is a toon that is fleeing from being a toon. Like, his plan is he's hiding as a person. We actually never get to see what he looks like beyond his eyes, what kind of a toon he looked like, but he's hiding that, and he hates toons as much as Eddie does at the beginning, and that's I think antagonists work the best when they're very, very adjacent to the protagonist. It's just that they become opposed as the protagonist goes through their change, through their arc of the story. And then I think that's Judge Doom serves that perfectly here. They're both former funny guys who have fled that life, and one of them is just trying to destroy that life more destructively. I guess the difference is here, Eddie Valiant is trying to destroy himself. Judge Doom is trying to destroy everything.
yeah, right. Fundamentally, Doom is acting out of like hate and psychopathy and greed, and Eddie's just acting out of grief and just not being able to face it. But but you're absolutely right that they're paralleled in that way. That's great. I mean, Christopher Lloyd does such a great job that like you kind of forget that this is Doc Brown. Like, he's such a great villain. Like my brain just does not recognize Doc Brown and Judge Doom as being the same person at all, which is the sign of a great actor, I guess.
Oh, he was so fantastic. I heard that Tim Curry auditioned for this role, and they said he was too scary, and so they didn't cast him.
That's great.
I mean, I think Christopher Lloyd is perfect for the role, and I can't imagine anyone else. But part of me wants to see that incredibly terrifying Curry performance, because I mean, I will say this movie scared me when I was a little kid. I think Judge Doom is terrifying. Like, the eyes and the voice, it's really freaky.
Yeah, I mean, I've even the default Judge Doom is scary. I mean, I've watched this with my kids a few times. At this time, they were like, "Can we just skip the shoe dip scene?" And I was like, "Yeah, we can."
Yeah, isn't that wild? This movie, like, this is a PG movie.
Yeah,
but there's some pretty fucked up shit in here.
It's scary, and it's also sad. Like,
it's really sad.
The shoe is obviously aware that it's dying. Like, that's really screwed up. We've got we've got the steamroller rolling over Doom, which I think I actually remember watching when I was a kid and being just more horrified than of anything in my life. Yeah. And then when he stands up again, I was just like, what the fuck? Yeah, I mean, I think another kind of like intense, scary moment that always jumps into my mind is when the drunk at the bar is sort of like basically mocking Eddie and asking him, like, who's your client this time, and just listing a bunch of toon names, and Eddie just like knocks him down and shoves an egg in his mouth and like growls at him, and you're like this is super aggressive. Like you were saying, this is the part of the movie where we're not really supposed to like Eddie. And I think me as a kid, that really did that. Actually, I was like, oh, this guy is scary and unpredictable. I don't like him. But of course, he wins you over. But I
think that's an important moment too, because I think we need to establish, not only is Eddie kind of this drunk broke guy who borrows cigarettes from children,
right?
just amazing. But also is this person with this really, really uncontrollable anger as well. This competence in violence that is really unnerving. I think it's really important that we don't see him as just like a drunk joke, that we see him as someone who can be dangerous. I think that's really important, and I think that's what that smashy egg scene absolutely does.
Yeah.
I like that that's the same guy who doesn't rat him out later, right?
It's true,
because I think that's a really fascinating thing that the movie's saying to you, and that's, I think, we kind of see there most clearly the role Roger is having in melting the ice heart of Bob Hoskins, because he's like, don't you understand? These people are scum. They'll rat on you for a nickel. And Roger's like, no, they won't. I made them laugh. Laughter is like the most important thing. I made them laugh. They would never do that to me. And he's right. He's the movie proves him right. And I think that's such an important scene for the progress of Eddie Valiant across this movie.
Yeah, I mean that whole sequence where they're hiding in the root cellar, whatever it's called. So intense and frightening. Yeah, God, I always forget about how great that is. Like that's like Zemeckis. He can do every kind of scene. Like it's funny. Like no one, or maybe people do. I was gonna say no one calls Zemeckis like an action director, but like the action scene at the end of this movie and at the end of Back to the Future and you know, even the smaller ones in the middle of this movie, like when Roger bursts through the wall and they have to fight their way out of the bar, like they're all perfectly shot and executed and storyboarded and edited, and just like everything about them is like bam, bam, bam. You've like, I don't know, man. It's like it's literally better than like actual action movies. With, you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, especially considering the fact that they had to go in after they shot everything and animate cartoons over it all, and animate cartoons over it all in a way that's believable. And I think the important thing to say here is that this is 1988, right? No computer is used in this at all. This is all hand-drawn animation that's layered and celled over the film to make it look 3D. They had to put like shading and shadows on like different layers, and then like they had to light it to make sure it matched the lighting of the studio. Like it is brilliant work from an animation perspective. Like it's just brilliant, and it looks great. It looks like this movie's what, 33 years old now. It still looks good. It really does. They blend pretty seamlessly. I mean, you can kind of see the lines in some places where you can see the blur between the actual film and the animation. It doesn't quite shade in properly, but those are far and few between. It just like you said, eventually you just kind of let your guard down and just you're sucked into it all, and you're not even paying attention to that anymore. It's incredible work. Like the animation team on this, just I don't understand how they did it. I don't.
I mean, stuff like when Jessica Rabbit is like dancing around him and like messes with his hat and then grabs his necktie and pulls it away from him. I know how they did that, and even watching it, I'm like, it just looks too good. Like normally when you know how they did a trick in a movie, it sort of ruins it for you. But like I know how they did that trick, and it still works on me.
Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah.
Did you hear about the Laserdisc version of this movie?
No.
So apparently, some of the animators got a little cheeky, especially with Jessica Rabbit. And there's a scene, you know, when the car crashes into the telephone pole, and Jessica Rabbit is thrown from the car, and she kind of spins around. There's a scene where you can see up her dress, and she's not wearing any underwear. In the original version, like when the movie came out, like in theaters, you couldn't see it. The frames went by too fast. There's no way you could see it. But then it came out on Laserdisc, and you could go frame by frame on Laserdisc, and everyone found, they animated in a vagina for this animated woman. The animators put this in there. And of course, people were very angry.
Very
also,
serious.
Also, the Laserdisc sold out immediately because because human beings be humans, right?
Yes.
And of course, all subsequent versions of this movie have had that scene deleted. But there's a little fun trivia for you.
That's delightful.
I also read that they like one of the things they wanted to do with Jessica Rabbit, because she is very clearly a toon, but also the most human looking toon. Like she's not an animal. They really like her proportions look that way deliberately, right? Like she is they want her to not look human. They want her to not move human. And I read that one of the ways they did that is they made her boobs jiggle the wrong direction. Like when she walks, her boobs jiggle up. They go up instead of down. And it's just a little touch that I didn't notice, but it's just part of what makes her seem not real,
Yeah.
seem like a cartoon.
Right. Just, I mean, kind of uncanny. Like her hair is always this like perfect blob, and it's,
and she just moves kind of like she moves not like a human moves. It's
Sure.
very clever. It's very
Sure.
clever. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah. I mean, God, like there's so many interesting little things they're doing with this movie, just like Jessica Rabbit as a concept, where like all of the human men are horny for her.
Yeah, which is, I don't even want to begin to unpack how that would work.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like, what's funny is like if this were real, that is totally what would happen.
Yes, total, 100%, 100%.
But like, yeah, I mean, and then she takes advantage of it, but then she's married to a cartoon rabbit because that's what she's into.
Yeah, and why is she with him? Because he makes her laugh.
Yeah,
you know, like
right.
I think there's when you first see Jessica Rabbit, Eddie is shocked that this is Roger Rabbit's wife,
right?
And he says that she's married to Roger Rabbit, and Betty Boop goes, "Yeah, isn't she lucky?"
Yeah,
it's just like all these wonderful touches like that, these wonderful moments. I think I kind of want to just talk about the insanity of having cartoons from like 12 different companies in the same movie. Like this is like the only way that happens again is if Disney literally just buys every single animation studio in the world, because like that's like never going to happen again. Like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse are in a scene together. Like Daffy Duck and Donald Duck are in a scene together. That's insane. It's insane.
There were simpler times.
Yeah, like a lot of studios just allowed this movie to borrow the rights, to just say, yeah, you can, for this just one movie, you can have it. They did dictate. I think the reason why Daffy and Donald are like dueling in the scene is because, like, I think Warner Brother was like, well, if you're going to do Disney, we have to be evenly matched. So they like, that's, I think also why Mickey and Bugs are in the same scene together. So it's fair, you know, like, I think there was probably a lot of ridiculous suits arguing about parody in all this stuff. I can imagine how ridiculous those conversations were, but just the fact that it happened, and it would not happen today. It just would not. Like, well, there's no way people say, yeah, let's do it.
And I don't want to say like it's necessary to the functioning of the movie, but like there's something just so delightful about him falling, and it's Mickey and Bugs who are falling with him. Like, that I don't know, like it makes it so much funnier when they screw him over. I guess
it does. I mean, I think the whole thing functions so much better when you have all of these different things mixed in, right? Because it makes it feel like this is not just because they've done, like, I think Warner Brothers has made follow-up movies to this where people interact with cartoons and they're just the Looney Tunes, right? I mean, that's what Space Jam is, but they've made more than just Space Jam. And there's always something so artificial about it, but just when you see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and God, I forget, did they get Hanna-Barbera in there too? I don't know. Like, they got like crazy amounts. Like, it wasn't just WB and Disney. They got all these other things in there as well. I think they got some Universal ones in there. Yeah, like Felix the Cat. I'm seeing Turner Entertainment let them use some of theirs. The ones they did not get was Tom and Jerry and Popeye and Casper. They said no, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Right.
But I think there's something that makes it seem like their thing is like, this is 1940s Hollywood, and in 1940s Hollywood we were drawing cartoons, and here's all the cartoons. It makes it seem like this is a full world and not just, oh, this is the Warner Brothers version of the world. This is the world.
I agree. It's hard to express why exactly that seems to matter, but it does. It makes me happy that happened. I guess it's because it would feel just slightly false if you were watching it and you just noticed like, oh, this is only the Warner Bros. Cartoons, or this is only only the Disney cartoons.
And I feel like if it was just Warner Brothers cartoons, it would be on the Warner Brothers lot, right? You wouldn't have Maroon Cartoon and Acme and these made up companies. They would want to brand it specifically these were the Disney lot, and that would make them kind of affect how, like, I just feel like, first of all, modern Disney would not allow a movie to be made with their characters that features an alcoholic who's drinking himself to death. Like, that just wouldn't happen. Like, it's just like, this is what I mean by lightning in a bottle. It's like they got all the studios to agree to it. They had the right team to make it happen. I mean, Disney, like, I think it was Michael Eisner, the CEO of Disney, that took over right about this time, that really pushed this movie into being. And he's the one that, like, accepted Zemeckis doing it, because I got the information open right here, and it says Zemeckis offers his services on this movie back in '82, but Disney said no because his last two movies had not been successful. Then he made Back to the Future. That was one of the most successful movies ever. So they gave it to him. They gave it back to him. But that's Eisner doing that, like, and then Amblin was in on it, right? Amblin Entertainment, which is Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, right.
There's just, like, so many names, so many big names in every spot, just saying, yeah, let's do this. And just would never happen, which has never happened.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's worth talking about for a second, because there's so many movies that we talk about where, the movie doesn't work. And we'll kind of talk about why it didn't work in a storytelling sense. But, like, generally speaking, I think there's, like, a bigger reason why a movie didn't work, and it's usually has to do with, like, well, the will to make it work wasn't there. Like, they had this script and they had this director, and they could only get these actors, and they just had to make the movie with what they had, and this is that movie. And so you can complain about it, but, like, this is what happens when the most talented people are just handed the power and told, make your weird thing that you want to make exactly the way you want to make it. And that happens very rarely. And when it does happen, it always results in something like this.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I mean, I think the last time we were talking about this is when you were ranting about Godzilla versus Kong and how nobody makes movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Instead, they make these garbage movies like Godzilla versus Kong. I mean, I think you're right. I just think this is a movie that said, we're going to do this ridiculous thing, but they were like, okay, we got to do the fundamentals. We got to do this a way that tells a compelling story still. Look, I love the Godzilla movies. I'm not Michael. I love those movies, but they're stupid and they're not trying to do that. And I don't think every movie has to try to do that, but also every movie is not going to get put on a list of some of the greatest movies of all time, which this one has very much earned its place on that list. So I think the difference between a good, fun movie and a great all-time movie are people recognizing that the basics like this movie takes very seriously, are things you need to spend time on. You need to make sure are functioning. And it's not enough to just say, this is people and tunes living together. Yeah. They did more than that. They told an LA noir story, and they also put cartoons in it.
Yeah, right. And I think fundamentally, like, I enjoy talking about, the details and the intricacies of storytelling with you. And I think that's fun to analyze and go into. But fundamentally, the reason why everybody loves this movie and everybody loves Back to the Future is that they just make you feel so good. Like when they end, there's no better fist bump moment than Doc Brown plugging in the cable and the lightning striking and Marty zipping off Back to the Future, or in this movie, Valiant, after basically getting his ass kicked by Doom for 10 minutes, using the hammer to hit the valve, and it like just amazing, like perfectly great setup moments, like setup and payoff with perfectly articulated emotional stakes, leading you to feel like yes, and just have that moment of transcendental movie watching experience that is just what you think about when you think about movies.
Yeah, the more I study filmmaking and the more I study storytelling, the more I've come to appreciate how important setup and payoff is to emotionally engage an audience. I just think, like, because it does multiple things at the same time. it rewards the audience for paying attention because you have that little dopamine hit where you're like, oh yeah, that's the hammer. Well, the first time he pulls out the hammer, you remember the part earlier in the movie when the function of the hammer was a giant fist pops out of it. And so you're kind of a fraction of a second ahead of the movie because you remember the setup. And that is very satisfying as a viewer. I mean, Back to the Future does the same thing. Back to the Future is set up and payoff all over the place. The entire third act of that movie is established in a dinner scene in the first act when Marty's sitting around dinner with his family and is told the story of the enchantment under the sea dance. Mm-hmm. And then we get to relive that whole thing with the little changes that Marty being there creates. But like, we're remembering the story. And there's this just basic satisfaction of seeing those setups pay off. And I think that's something that this movie understands very, very well, that feels good as a viewer. And if you can attach that to an emotionally significant moment in the arc of the character, then you make something great.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that stuff has to be executed right. Like you can't, maybe at the risk of belaboring the point, you can't leave out the emotional connection, and you also can't leave out the careful setup so that the audience isn't like having to do problem solving or intellectualizing as they're watching it. Mm-hmm. They have to be in the moment, and they have to understand, non-verbally and unconsciously what's happening and what that means. And that's hard to do. I mean, again, it requires that you have that the script be like absolutely airtight and have all of that in there. And then that the filmmakers and the actors execute on that perfectly.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that complicated either. Yeah. Like some of the setups in this movie are just really simple. Yeah. There's the one just where when they say goodbye to the cartoon cab, he says, hey, whenever you raise your thumb and I'll find you. Right. And then that pays off a little bit later when Eddie like is not even meaning to call the cab, just saying, no, we need to go that way. And he throws his thumb out to point their direction, and then boom, there's the cab. And that's just a fun payoff to this little throwaway line they set up. Like some of this stuff doesn't have to be that complicated. It's just fun. It's enjoyable. It's entertaining to see these moments pay off in these ways.
I love that the movie even throws in like a kind of what's the word, like metaphysics for nitpickers when Roger Rabbit and him are handcuffed together, and then Roger slips out of the handcuff easily, and Eddie's like, "Do you mean to tell me you could have done that at any time?" And he's furious, and Roger says, like for the first time in the movie, very seriously, "No, only when it was funny," and like that's like a silly one-off joke, but actually, it's kind of important because why didn't they just slip out of the ropes later when they were tied up? Because it wouldn't have been funny. Like they don't have just arbitrary magic. They only have goofy toon magic when it would be funny, right? And like that's exactly like this is a nitpick no one has ever actually made, but the movie addresses it anyway, right?
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, like again, very few perfect movies in the world. Yeah. I have no qualms with calling this a perfect movie. I cannot think of a bad thing to say about this movie at all. I guess if you rather force me, I do think the plot of this movie as a little kid watching it for the first time is pretty hard to follow, but maybe that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, I think just like being like, wait, so what?
Right.
A road? He just wanted
a
road. Okay.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but like it's the highway thing is a joke, and it's a completely deadpan joke that I don't think I got until I was much older, where Doom is like, wonderful, wonderful billboards as far as the eye can see, and you're like, that's hilarious, but I didn't get it at all when I was a kid. And so like in other words, the whole plot of the movie is this ridiculous idea that this self-hating toon wants to pave over Toontown with a freeway covered in billboards.
Which is, I mean, something that we know happens anyway, right?
True.
Like we living in 1981 when this movie came out, or 1988 rather, that's what Los Angeles is. It's freeways everywhere.
Yeah.
and there's billboards and rest stops and fast food. Like he basically describes what fast food is on this rant about how he envisions the future. And yeah, the joke is that, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Right. Right.
But in this
yes.
in this world, it didn't.
Yeah.
I think this is such a smart thing because they chose to set it in the 40s. The book that this is based off of, which is very, very different from the movie, was set in present day, and the book came out in 1981. So it was a choice they made to set this in the 40s, to set this in Hollywood, to set this with cartoons. Because I think in the book it was more comic strip characters. It was not cartoon, like animated cartoon characters. And it was a very different tone. It was just very, very, very different. Roger Rabbit dies in the book. He's murdered.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually, like, apparently in the book, toons have the ability to copy themselves. So like, instead of doing dangerous stunts, they make a copy of themselves, and the copy does the stunts, and then the copy eventually just like disappears after a couple days. And so Roger Rabbit dies in the movie, and then it is his copy that he makes before he died that is helping Valiant solve the mystery of his murder. And then at the end of the movie, his copy, or end of the book, his copy disappears because it runs out of time. It's a very, very different book.
Yeah.
It's very different. So they basically just took the basic concept of film noir plus cartoons, and then they just ran with it and changed everything else.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the hard-boiled detective at the core of the story was probably similar. You have to wonder if they had the same, like, his brother was killed by toons idea. I have no idea.
That I don't know.
Yeah.
I've only read summaries of that book. I've never actually read it myself.
That's fine. I mean, it's they did what they had to do. Like that's I think I don't remember what we were talking about exactly, but the idea that like in an adaptation, like the adaptation really has to be suited to the medium first and foremost, and you're going to have to cut things out and condense things and simplify things for an hour and a half movie.
Sure.
And potentially change things quite significantly just because there is no actual way to adapt the thing as it exists on the page faithfully. That just isn't a thing. So
yeah, this makes me really want to do a Deconstructing Zemeckis series.
Yeah. I agree. Like there's a bunch of these directors. I think what was the other one we were talking about the other day? The
Pirates of the Caribbean guy, right?
Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean guy.
I'm blanking on who that is.
Yeah, it'll come
Verbinski,
to me.
Gore Verbinski.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Where like I didn't realize that so many movies that I loved were Gore Verbinski, and I was like, oh wow, okay, he just got several places forward in my list.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at Robert Zemeckis's filmography here, right?
Sure.
We have first two movies, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Used Cars, did not do well. Romancing the Stone, that's a movie that's a Kirk Douglas or Michael Douglas movie that my wife absolutely loves and made me watch it, and it's pretty fun. Then we have Back to the Future. We have Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 3, Death Becomes Her.
Oh my God.
Forrest Gump, Contact, What Lies Beneath.
Contact?
Yeah,
Wow.
he directed Contact. What Lies Beneath, which is a great little Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer thriller. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's excellent. What's next? I lost it. Castaway. And that's when this is about, I think 2000. Castaway is when Zemeckis starts to lose me a little bit, because we have The Polar Express, Beowulf, A Christmas Carol. I can't remember. That's the Jim Carrey
with
version.
Jim Carrey,
yeah.
Flight.
Then we have
Denzel
Flight,
Washington.
The Walk, which I believe is the French guy that walks across the Twin Towers. Allied, which I don't know if I ever saw. I did see that movie.
I've never heard of this.
It's a Brad Pitt movie. Welcome to Marwen, which is I never actually saw it, but I've heard terrible things. And last year's The Witches, which is a remake of the Roald Dahl story.
He's made a lot of movies, which makes it kind of intimidating to contemplate a full deconstructing series. I wonder if, like, at a certain point, he just was like, "I've made enough great movies. I want to explore and do weird and creative things." And because because he makes the Polar Express and Beowulf and A Christmas Carol all in a row. He's clearly like the whole decade of the 2000s almost. He seems to be really into CGI, full
Yeah.
CGI features. It's like he really thinks this is the way of the future.
Yeah.
Which it has not really been, actually.
No. Not at least not in that way. Gosh, the Polar Express is just terrifying.
Yeah.
That movie scared the shit out of me. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying we're going to do a deconstructing Robert Zemeckis series, but looking at this filmography, it seems I want to revisit Forrest Gump. It's a movie I don't like very much. We've done a whole episode, one of our first few episodes, where me explaining to you exactly why I hate Forrest Gump. And I wonder 5 years later into this whole analyzing movies project if my opinion on that movie has changed.
I mean, it's definitely well directed. I think your problem with Forrest Gump is the story.
Yeah, the bullshit story.
The very nihilistic and cruel story.
Yes.
I think I would easily be down for Robert Zemeckis 1978 through 2000.
Yeah, deconstructing half of Zemeckis.
Deconstruct. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Before we like end on Roger Rabbit, I just wanted to like, and since we're talking about him as a director anyway, I was thinking like, why is it that this movie is filed right next to Back to the Future in my brain? Like to me, they're so similar. And then I looked up both movies and just put them side by side, and I realized they have the same director. They both star Christopher Lloyd. They both have their music by Alan Silvestri. They have the same cinematographer, the same editor. They have several producers, but they both have Amblin as one of their producers. And then, of course, they're released 3 years apart. So it's like, oh, okay, they were made by the same team. Basically, is why. Mystery solved.
Yeah, I mean, kind of understand why this movie was so successful, because they like, oh, hey, Back to the Future worked really well. Let's get the team back together, and that's what they did. And good job, team. Good job. All right. So I think it's time for the vote. And do we even need to do this? We both called it a perfect movie. I can't imagine a world in which I don't say yes to this movie. And for those of you voting at home, if you vote no, I really, really want to know why. We don't always get comments on our vote, but if you vote no for this movie, like, please tell me. Not because I'm like saying, no, you're stupid and wrong, although in this case, but I'm just curious. Because I think not all movies work for all people. And I'm sure there are people out there who this movie just does not work for them. I'm sure that is the case. And I just want to understand why.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, because it's so hard. Like, again, this is going to sound like insulting, but like it's so hard for me to imagine this movie not working that I want to hear like what, like, is there a specific thing? Is there a specific problem? Is it that you can't buy into the whole tunes conceit or something like that? Like, I want to know. I do actually want to understand. Because like one of my driving things that I like want from the project that is Doof is to like come to deeply understand the fundamental rules of storytelling. And the thing is, everybody's different. So even the statement fundamental rules of storytelling is probably slightly an erroneous statement, because it's like, well, there is no such thing as a perfect story that perfectly works for everyone, because everyone is different. And that's part of understanding the rules of storytelling, is knowing, okay, well, like how do things that work on 99% of people misfire on 1%? That's still very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as much as we tend to talk about things we love more than we talk about things that we don't like, because I think it's more fun to talk about things that you like, and it's more fun to listen to people talk about things that they like. But I do think there's almost more to be learned in this manner from the people that don't like the thing, or from dissecting a movie that you really hate. Because I think figuring out why a thing doesn't work on someone is like a key to unlocking what good storytelling is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that the trouble with this, and I think most people would agree with this, is that it's very difficult to tell why you didn't like something.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to express that, and people that just casually watch things that don't think about it very much actually do a very bad job of explaining why they don't like something. And I think they get it wrong sometimes. They reach for the nearest thing and the most clear thing when, as we found, and we really have delved into these critiques, we've kind of found that actually what's not working on you is something much more complicated that you just weren't aware of. But this is why the whole plot hole phenomenon exists, right? Because if you're not enjoying a movie and you reach for why am I not enjoying this, and the first thing you come to is what appears to be a logical inconsistency, and then you go, well, that must be it. It must be this, and it's almost always more complicated than that.
And I would say it's almost always actually more at the level of you don't actually like the characters, you're not actually into the movie, and thus you're looking for problems. Like I can actually imagine not liking this movie if you just really dislike Eddie Valiant for some specific reason, and he never grows on you, you know? Like I could totally, like if somebody says that's their reason, I would just be like, I get it, you know?
If that moment midway through the movie where Zemeckis obviously tries to turn on the pity factor to make you identify with this guy, if that moment falls flat with you, I don't think the rest of the movie works for you at all, because you're just like, this guy's an asshole. I don't care. I don't care if he quits drinking because of a rabbit. I don't care about it. So I could see that.
Yeah, but I will say, I mean, they executed it so well that I think it would be a rare person who would say that, but it's not impossible for me to imagine.
Yeah, totally. Or you could just like hate like Looney Tunes zany stuff and just like none of that works on you. But see, even still, I do think that like this movie nails those parts so well that even if like you didn't grow up watching Looney Tunes, I think those moments are still pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's the intro to this movie, the cartoon, which we didn't really talk about. The fact that it begins with what feels just like a classic, Looney Tunes cartoon, except it's like way better animated, and it begins the thing where every frame has some visual storytelling or humor in it, where the baby's going from like horrible danger to horrible danger on like a second to second basis. Like that's very classic, but also kind of like amplified for the fact that it's a film.
Yeah. And of course we have to say, we can't leave without saying the best line in the whole movie. I'm not bad. I was just drawn that way. Perfect. This is, I mean, like Jessica Rabbit falls into the classic film noir femme fatale role, right? Like even the point where like at 6 different times throughout the movie, you're not sure which side she's on. You're just like, okay, the movie kind of fakes you out when it has her smack Roger over the head with a pan and throw him and stuff him in the trunk. Like that's kind of a cheat and a fake out, but they even make a joke out of it in the end, because she's like, I just wanted to keep him safe, so I hit him on the head with a pan and threw him in the trunk. And they're just like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever.
He's a tune. You can't hurt him that way, right?
Yeah.
It's a joke and a fake out, but it's a comedy, so it's fine. I'm glad you mentioned Jessica, because it reminded me that I wanted to talk for at least a second about Dolores. What an important character Dolores is, because Dolores is the straight man, actually.
Yes.
Eddie Valiant is not the straight man. You might in the beginning he kind of serves that role, but then by the end he's definitely not. And like the point of his character is that that's not actually who he is. But Dolores is like, I'm just trying to run my bar, and I'm not involved in this tune stuff really. Like, but like she gets pulled into it, and she just stays very grounded the whole time. Yeah. And like I felt like it was very important to this movie that it have the Dolores character, so that the movie and so that Eddie specifically has one foot in the grounded real world. We're gonna go on our vacation together after this is all over type of thing.
I think you're so right, and I love that moment where she gets the camera for him, and she says, there might still be pictures on there from our old vacation, and he says, oh yeah, we should do that again sometime. And he's so distracted that he completely misses that, like, that hurts her. Like that obviously, like, it becomes very clear that they were an item, right?
Yeah.
And some point along the line, they stopped really being an item. And she obviously has some pain for that because he just kind of receded from the world. So you kind of get the idea that there was never like an official, we're not going steady anymore conversation. He just kind of retreated from the world and only sees her when he goes to the bar to get drunk.
Right.
And obviously that's an open wound for her. And his very casual, kind of indifferent, oh yeah, we should do that again sometime, is like a dagger to her.
Yeah.
And it's such just a beautiful characterization moment for the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, their little romance is great. Their little, you should get yourself a good man. I already have a good man. I'm going to cry again. I love this movie.
I remember when she marches in on him with Jessica Rabbit and says, I caught you with your pants down. And it's literally true because his pants are down. I love this fucking movie. Oh my God. Yeah. So the vote is yes, 1,000 times. Yes.
Yes, of course.
I have never been more positive about any of these votes than this movie. And we've covered some truly phenomenal movies.
That is a funny statement, but I agree completely. This is the most unqualified yes.
All right. So once again, in the show notes of this very episode, there is a link to our Patreon account where you will find an active poll to vote yes or no on this movie. Once again, you do not have to be a patron in order to vote in this poll. It is a public post that will be available to all. So please consider voting. And if you vote no, as we said, let us know why. I really, really want to know.
Doof. All right. You want to tell me about The Kid Detective?
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect time to talk about this. So The Kid Detective is a movie that came out last year. And the reason I watched it is twofold, actually. The first reason I watched it is because during Ruben and Elliot's all packed up 24-hour charity live stream that they did when they finished the novel Pact, they did an actual play Packed Dice thing that you and I participated in.
Yeah.
And so we had to roll characters for that. And I rolled a character called Kent Sullivan, Boy Reporter. And the point of my character was he was like this really successful, like, reporter as a kid. And then like 30 years later is just middle-aged and still kind of going off of the success of being this like prodigy reporter investigative reporter when he was a kid. And in the world of Pact, like, because he called himself Kent Sullivan, Boy Reporter, he had to introduce himself as Kent Sullivan, Boy Reporter the entire time, which I thought was hilarious.
Yes, it was.
So I saw this movie, The Kid Detective, and I was like, oh, it's someone just basically made Kent Sullivan, Boy the Reporter the movie, except instead of an investigative reporter, he was just a detective. And so the concept of this movie is this kid was a very, very popular kid detective who would solve all these kind of mostly like petty, like children's problems, but like you can imagine a young adult detective story about a very, very popular and well regarded in the town kid detective.
It's sort of a Hardy Boys Encyclopedia Brown type figure.
Yes. Yeah. And then we fast forward to him at 32 years old, and he's still a detective, but no one cares anymore because he's not a little kid. And you kind of learn that actually he wasn't that good of a detective. It was just really, really minor stuff that didn't matter. And actually the reason he kind of spirals is because when he's, I guess 13, this little girl, it goes missing, and everyone's like, you got to find him. You got to find her, kid detective. And he never could. He never could find her. And this is like haunted him, like being a child who's like having fun playing detective and solving these like petty thievery and stuff that doesn't matter. And who stole the charity fund from the school. And like, I think one of them is like, my friend says he got to practice with the Mets pitcher last summer. Find out if he's lying or not. Like stuff like that. Right. And so this damaged him, but he's still just doing this reporting thing. The other reason I decided to watch it is because it stars Adam Brody, who plays Seth in the show, The OC, which is a show that I'm doing a podcast about with my wife. So like that, it was like 2 for 2 with me, and I was like, hell yeah, we're watching this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I expected this to just be just like a throw off kind of funny, haha, he was this kid detective and now he's an adult and now he's got to learn, like a kind of a coming of age story, like an Arrested Development coming of age story with a lot of funny jokes in it. And it is that, but it's like, it's actually really fucking good too. Like
Okay.
it navigates similar to Roger Rabbit, but not with the same disparity in tones, but it navigates between these scenes of real pathos and these goofy one-off jokes about the absurdity of him being a kid detective. It navigates those tone disparities really, really, really well. And the third act of the movie is just incredible. It's just so good. And I watched this as just like a fun joke. Like, so like I was like, oh, this is fun. I can talk about this on the show because it relates to things that we've talked about before. But it's like one of the best movies I saw last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really fantastic. And it's directed and written by a guy named Evan Morgan, who I've never heard of before. This is his first feature film. He's directed 3 shorts before this. I don't know how this was made. I don't know how he sold this. Like, I don't know the story of what happened here that got this movie made, but like, I'm suddenly paying very close attention to Evan Morgan because this is a really, really good movie, and it just came out of nowhere for me.
Very cool. Yeah, I've heard some buzz about this.
I think Red Letter Media like stole my thunder a little bit and released a video about it like yesterday. I was like, I'm going to talk about this on the show this week, and then they beat me to it. But
I started watching that video, and they were making such a good case for it that I was like, I don't want to know any more about this. I'm just going to watch it, and I stopped, which I normally I've either already seen the movie or I don't care about it being spoiled. But this was one where I was like, they're making it sound so good that I think I don't want to spoil it.
That's good to hear. I hadn't watched the video yet, so it's good to hear that they liked it.
Yeah, definitely they did. Yeah,
that's good. It's really good, man. it's like I don't want to. Yeah, I did, like I'm sure they did. I don't want to spoil too much of it with you, but this is one of those movies that I think, just similar to Roger Rabbit, just does a very good job establishing the character and leading you through this guy's journey, and really, really powerful end this movie has. Really does.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely want to see that. So that's just on some streaming platform, I guess.
Yeah, I think you have to rent it. I think I rented it from Amazon Prime. I think it's like $5 rental. It came out last year, but like, I don't know if it 2020 was so weird that what movies come out when and where and how was not clear to me. But I only found it a couple weeks ago, just randomly on Amazon. I was like, Ken Sullivan, boy reporter, played by Seth Cohen.
It's fate.
Yeah, it was great. So that is The Kid Detective. Recommend. Everyone should go watch that.
All right.
That is it for this week. If you have any opinions on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, on Robert Zemeckis, or on The Kid Detective, if you went out and saw it, please let us know what you thought. Email us at doofmedia@gmail.com or contact us on Twitter @doofmedia. And you can always chat with us in the Doof Media subreddit. You'll see a post for this very episode that you can talk about any of the stuff we chatted about this week. So head on over there and let us know what you thought.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
Yeah, and you can find this and all of our other shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find our other podcast, Kingslingers, which is a Dark Tower podcast. And I'm mentioning that this week because today's episode, in fact, we got to the end of the last book. So there are 7 books worth of content of Matt and I talking in great detail and depth about this wonderful series by Stephen King. So if you have not given that a shot yet, please do. Even if you haven't read the books before. I think, Matt, I can firmly say, Matt, would you recommend people read the Dark Tower series now?
I highly recommend the Dark Tower series.
There we go. All right, so check out Kingslingers over at doofmedia.com. You can also see Pace. That is the brand new live-action role-play, similar to the thing we were talking about with Kent Sullivan, Boy Reporter. This is Ruben and Elias live-action role-play with a couple of their friends. That it takes place in space. The first episode is out now.
Awesome.
And once again, if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and donate at the Council of Doof level, which will allow you to nominate films for us to watch in this monthly series and be part of the vote that gets to decide which one we're covering. Thank you so much to our council members that voted to have us talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I had not thought about this movie in so long, and it was a pleasure getting to revisit it and see just how much I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, one of my favorite movies. Was really, really happy that this was selected because I've actually kind of wanted to talk about it on a Doofcast for a while, but I didn't have a reason. So thank you for giving me that reason.
Totally.
Yeah. But anyway, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts if you have the time. We really appreciate it if you would. Each review helps us to get more exposure, and just the algorithm really likes that stuff. It'll show our podcast to more people, and that will be awesome for us, and then we will be happy. And
yes,
there you go.
And you want to make us happy, don't you? I don't know why I got ominous there, but
yeah.
Hey. Miss Scott, that's what they call me.
Well, I was gonna go more like, if we made you laugh on this episode, then it's the most important thing you can do for someone.
Yeah, that's much better and more thematic than me scaring our listeners for no reason. Good job, Matt.
So therefore, you'd better give us a review.
And you ruined it. All right, folks, that is it for this week. Next week on the show, we are returning to our Deconstructing Del Toro series with his giant mech versus kaiju film, Pacific Rim. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.